My parents threw me a graduation dinner. I noticed one small thing in my drink, and my brother collapsed instead. Hi, I'm Adrian, 24, and my graduation dinner ended with my brother in the ICU and my parents on national news. Let me explain. I graduated last spring from Columbia with a degree in environmental toxicology. Sounds boring, I know, but let me tell you, it turned out to be the exact degree I needed to bring down my parents' entire pharmaceutical empire. The night it all blew up, we were on the rooftop of the Langford Hotel in Manhattan. Glass walls, skyline views, string quartet playing something expensive sounding. My parents had spared no expense. We're talking Wagyu sliders and caviar deviled eggs. All this for me, the disappointment child. The one who didn't go to Wharton like my little brother Theo, the golden retriever of humans. Harvard grad, top of his class, future CEO of Stanton Biopharma. I knew something was off the moment my mom smiled at me. Like genuinely smiled. Not that your tie's wrinkled, or don't embarrass us kind of smile. No, this one was syrupy and soft, like she cared. That's when I started looking closer. Call it instinct, or maybe just years of being on the receiving end of their selective affection. And then I saw it. My mother's hand, that perfectly manicured hand with her giant sapphire ring, hovered ever so briefly over my drink. I caught the shimmer of powder dissolving just as the server turned away. She did it so quickly anyone else would have missed it. But I didn't. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I simply smiled, stood up, picked up the glass, and handed it to Theo, my golden boy little brother who had just been bragging about his fast-track promotion. You deserve this more than I do, I said, cheerful as hell. He laughed, clinked glasses with me, and downed every drop. Within 20 minutes, he was on the floor. And that was just the beginning. The chaos started small. A stumble, a hand to his chest. Theo laughed it off, said it was the champagne hitting too fast. But champagne doesn't usually make you lose all color in your face or sweat like you just ran a marathon in August. He collapsed 5 feet from the dessert bar. People screamed. Chairs scraped back. Someone dropped a plate of lobster ravioli. My father, Arthur Stanton, billionaire CEO of Stanton Biopharma, was on his feet in an instant. Barking orders like this was just another boardroom crisis. My mom froze. Like really froze. The woman who once yelled at a florist for including peonies in her charity gala centerpieces suddenly couldn't move. She just stood there, staring at Theo like he was a broken vase. I knelt beside him, checked his pulse. It was faint, fluttery. I leaned closer and whispered, "Hang on, man. You've got a role to play in this." He didn't hear me, obviously, but it felt necessary to say. People were calling for ambulances. Phones out. Flashlights on. And through all that chaos, I saw Jake, my best friend since forever, across the room, filming everything. Jake knew. I told him everything a week ago. About the trust fund my grandmother left me. About how I discovered the environmental violations at my parents' research facility in Jersey. About the powder in the glass. Jake gave me a small nod, then turned the camera toward my mother. She still hadn't moved. But her eyes, those were working overtime. They were locked on Theo, on the glass in his hand, on me. The ambulance arrived in under 10 minutes. They wheeled Theo out with oxygen over his face, IVs already in. I rode with him, my parents trailing behind in their black Escalade like we were just heading to some urgent shareholder meeting. In the ER, doctors swarmed. They asked if he'd ingested anything unusual. I stepped forward. Yes, I said. He drank from a glass my mother poured for me. It might have contained a cyclophenylamine derivative, possibly experimental, likely tied to one of Stanton Biopharma's shelved research compounds. Project Sigmiar. Everything stopped. A nurse blinked at me. A doctor said, "How do you know that?" And I just looked at him and said, "Because I interned in the lab that created it." And that was the moment everything truly detonated. The ER turned into a war room. Doctors scrambled to verify what I said. Toxicology was rushed. Blood samples taken. Within 20 minutes, one of the senior physicians, Dr. Levinson, stormed into the waiting room and looked directly at me. "You saved your brother's life," he said, no preamble. "That compound you mentioned? We've seen it once, in a leaked industry report from last year. You recognizing it let us get a counteragent in fast. Without that, we'd be calling the coroner." Behind him, my parents stood stiff and silent. My mother had finally stopped pretending to be the perfectly groomed hostess and was now gripping her designer handbag like it could stop time. My father, The same man who once told a senator to go ahead and try to regulate me. Looked like he was trying to regulate his own heartbeat. I wasn't done. While the doctors worked on Theo, I sat down with the attending officers who'd been called in. I have more, I said, opening my messenger bag and pulling out a flash drive. Environmental impact reports, sample data, falsified logs, internal memos from Stanton Biopharma's R&D division. All of it ties back to Project Sigmiar. The younger cop blinked. Wait, you're saying your parents poisoned your brother by accident, trying to poison you, to stop you from exposing corporate fraud? That's the short version, I replied. The long version includes bribed EPA inspectors and several toxic dumping sites near low-income neighborhoods. The older cop sat back and let out a low whistle. Kid, he said, you just declared war. Not really, I said. I already won. They just don't know it yet. By the time Theo was stabilized and moved to ICU, the FBI had been looped in. Turns out, my data, and Jake's rooftop video of the glass switch, had already reached the right inboxes thanks to a friend of a friend in D.C. The wheels of justice were already turning. When my parents tried to leave the hospital, the agents were waiting. Arthur Stanton, Veronica Stanton, one said calmly, showing his badge. You're both being detained for questioning regarding attempted poisoning, corporate fraud, and potential environmental violations under federal statute. My mother gasped. My father tried to laugh it off, tried to threaten the agent, which went exactly how you'd expect. And I just stood there in the hallway, next to Jake, watching them be led away in cuffs. Dude, Jake whispered. You just home aloned a billion-dollar crime family. Yeah, I said, eyes on the cuffs. And I'm just getting started. The headlines exploded before I even got home. Pharma Empire heir hospitalized at graduation dinner. Suspected poisoning. Stanton Biopharma CEO detained in federal investigation. Whistleblower's son may have uncovered decades of corruption. And there, in high-res photos taken from the rooftop party, was my face. Me, awkwardly hugging Theo just minutes before he collapsed. Me, raising the glass. Me, at the center of a story that no one outside our circle could have possibly believed. Until the footage hit. Jake's video, clean, steady, and time-stamped, showed the whole thing. My mother's sleight of hand over the drink. My father insisting on pouring it himself. The moment I passed it to Theo. The look on their faces when he drank it. We sent it anonymously to 3 news outlets, a federal investigator, and one very popular anti-corporate TikTok account. It went viral in under 2 hours. The public response? Nuclear. People loved the betrayal angle. Loved the reversal. The son they wrote off becomes the whistleblower. The golden child collapses. The empire cracks. And in the middle of it all, I was sitting in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, microwaving leftover pad thai and answering calls from federal agents like it was just another Tuesday. Meanwhile, Theo, thank God, survived. He woke up 48 hours after the incident, groggy, heart monitor beeping like a metronome of regret. When I walked into his room, he looked at me with wide, confused eyes. What the hell happened? You drank my poison, I said bluntly. He blinked. You poisoned me? I laughed. No, Theo. They did. It was meant for me. I switched the glasses. He sat there in stunned silence for a long time. Then, slowly, he whispered, they wouldn't. I pulled out the flash drive. They would. They did. And I can prove it. Theo didn't speak. He just stared at the drive like it was glowing. Then he said the words that floored me. What do we do now? Not what do you do? Not how could this happen? We. That word broke something in me. Years of rivalry, jealousy, bitterness. But it also lit a spark. For the first time in our lives, Theo and I were finally on the same side. And the side we'd chosen was war. The week after Theo woke up, we became a 2-man wrecking crew. We set up shop in my apartment, converted my kitchen table into a war desk with blueprints, leaked documents, and court filings taped to the wall like we were running a 1-bedroom FBI field office. Theo had access to internal company servers. I had years of buried lab notes, water samples, and whistleblower contacts from grad school. Together, we were a storm. Theo called it ethical arson. I called it Tuesday. First, we dropped the files on the illegal clinical trials. Turns out, Stanton Biopharma had been using manipulated data from overseas trials to fast-track approvals in the U.S. Trials that never even met international standards. Some of the subjects were children. When CNN picked up that story, the word Stanton trended for all the wrong reasons. Then came the environmental files. I had data sets linking factory waste to spikes in cancer rates in 2 New Jersey towns. Independent labs confirmed it. Maps we made went viral. TikTok activists made infographics. Environmental lawyers started circling like sharks. Theo, who had never sent an email without a PR team, started showing up on podcasts, talking about justice, admitting his role in the system in the silence. People listened, because when the golden child says, "We were wrong," it hits different. Our parents, still in custody. Their bail requests got denied after prosecutors showed footage of my mom slipping powder into the glass. That footage was now Exhibit A in both the criminal case and the civil suits piling up like snow in Buffalo. And yet, they were still fighting back, leaking statements to the press, claiming we'd fabricated everything, that Theo had been brainwashed, that I was mentally unstable. Classic. Except now, no one was buying it. Public opinion had flipped. What started as scandal turned into movement. Protests popped up outside Stanton Biopharma HQ. Employees quit in waves. Their stock price plummeted. Journalists hounded former execs. One even tried to interview me outside my apartment, but I told her I'd only talk after the trials, because that's where it was all heading. The federal charges were stacked. Fraud, attempted poisoning, environmental violations, medical ethics breaches. And in the middle of it all, 2 siblings, formerly the punchline of their parents' cocktail parties, were now the ones holding the matchbook. One night, after another wave of subpoenas went out, Theo and I sat on my fire escape eating cheap pizza. "You think they ever loved us?" he asked. I stared out at the city. "I think they loved what we could be for them." He nodded, chewing quietly. "Let's make sure they know exactly who we are now." I raised my slice. "To the disappointments." He grinned. "To the threats." And we clinked greasy pizza crusts like they were champagne flutes. The trial began 6 months later, and from the moment the courtroom doors opened, it felt like the climax of a high-stakes thriller. National media packed every available seat. Protesters chanted outside. A Netflix doc crew even requested access to film it live. Denied, of course, but they still lurked around with boom mics and nervous-looking interns. Inside, the air was heavy. My father entered in a stiff gray suit, still trying to look like a Fortune 500 CEO instead of a man on trial for poisoning his own son. My mother followed in designer clothes toned down just enough to seem modest, though the $2,000 handbag kind of ruined the effect. I sat beside Theo at the prosecution's table, the designated star witnesses. When the bailiff called, "The People versus Arthur and Veronica Stanton," I felt a chill run down my spine. The defense came out swinging, trying to paint me as a resentful dropout with a vendetta, and Theo as the weak-willed younger sibling manipulated by a bitter brother. They called me a fringe scientist with a personal grudge. One of the lawyers even referred to my environmental research as Google Science. Theo leaned over and whispered, "Did this man just call you a YouTuber with a microscope?" I deadpan whispered back, "I do own a microscope, and it cost more than his watch." But the prosecution? Oh, they brought the fire. First, the toxicology reports. They confirmed the exact compound found in Theo's bloodstream, traced directly to Stanton Biopharma's shelved experimental drug, Project Sigmiar. Next, the rooftop footage. That high-definition, perfectly lit video of my mom's hand hovering just a little too long over the glass. My dad handing it to me handing it to Theo. The look on their faces when he drank it. Every frame of it projected on a giant screen for the jury. Then came the whistleblowers, 5 former employees from the company's R&D and compliance teams. Each testified about falsified clinical trials, silenced internal reports, and pressure from the very top. When one woman, a former safety compliance officer, broke down crying on the stand while describing how she was told to bury an adverse reaction report involving a 9-year-old patient, the jury looked physically ill. And still, my parents sat there, stone-faced, emotionless. But nothing hit harder than Theo's testimony. He took the stand in a gray suit, no tie, hands trembling only slightly. "My name is Theodore Stanton," he said, voice steady. "I was supposed to take over Stanton Biopharma, but I now understand I was being groomed not to lead, but to protect a legacy built on silence, on lies. The night I was poisoned, that glass was meant for my brother. and I drank it because I trusted my parents." The courtroom was silent. Then he added, "They used to call me the future of this company. But if this is what the future looks like, it needs to be burned to the ground." Mic dropped. The judge actually had to call a recess because one of the jurors started crying. When Theo stepped down, he looked at me, eyes glassy, but defiant. For the first time, I saw not just my little brother, but an ally, a fighter, and we were winning. Week 3 of the trial, and my parents' defense team had run out of clean shirts and decent arguments. The last Hail Mary came when they called me to the stand. Their strategy? Discredit me, paint me as a radical, a vengeful, emotionally unstable son who staged everything for control of the company and my grandmother's trust fund. Their lawyer stood with his shiny cufflinks and smug smile and said, "Mr. Stanton, would you agree that you have a long-standing resentment toward your parents?" I looked at him, deadpan. "Well, they did try to poison me, so, yeah, I'm not sending them a fruit basket anytime soon." Someone in the gallery actually snorted. He paced dramatically. "Isn't it true that your research had been dismissed by your department prior to your graduation?" "Nope," I replied. "Got published in the Journal of Environmental Health. Want me to send you a copy? I'll even autograph it." He kept swinging, but I dodged every jab with cold, clinical clarity. I explained the data, the EPA violations, the falsified records. I even cited the compound structure and listed off its side effects by heart. Then I showed how it appeared in the very river systems the company had been quietly dumping into for over 5 years. And when the prosecutor redirected, I dropped the bomb. "There's a private lab I worked with offsite," I said, voice calm. "We retained water samples and had independent verification of toxicity levels. I also provided these results to the Department of Justice 2 weeks before the poisoning." The courtroom exploded. My parents' lawyer looked like he'd just swallowed a stapler. My father visibly clenched his jaw, but my mother, she finally broke. Tears, mascara streaks, the whole performance. She stood and cried. "I just wanted him to stay in the family. We gave him everything." I stood too, quietly. "You gave me expectations. You gave me silence. And the one time I chose my own path, you tried to erase me." The judge banged the gavel and ordered order. The room was humming. The next day, the prosecution called its final witness, an anonymous chemist from Stanton's R&D team, face blurred, voice altered, who confirmed under oath that the compound used in Project Sigmoar had never passed safety trials, that they'd been ordered to suppress findings, that the data was scrubbed clean to fake FDA compliance. It was the nail in the coffin. The jurors didn't even look at my parents anymore, just at us, 2 sons who had survived not only a crime, but a lifetime of manipulation disguised as love. We didn't speak much on the ride home, but when we got back to the apartment, Theo turned to me. "You think they'll actually get time?" I nodded. "They won't buy their way out of this. Not this time." He exhaled, slow and long. Then he smiled, just a little. "Good," he said. "Then let's finish this." The verdict came down on a cloudy Thursday morning. Theo and I sat side by side, front row. We didn't speak, just listened as the jury foreperson stood, voice unwavering. On the charges of attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and willful violation of federal environmental laws, we find the defendants, Arthur Stanton and Veronica Stanton, guilty on all counts. Silence. Then murmurs. Then cameras clicking like popcorn in a microwave. My father didn't flinch. He just stared straight ahead, face like marble. My mother, well, she cried. But it was the kind of cry that still made sure her hair looked good in the courtroom sketches. The judge didn't hold back. 20 years federal time for my father, 15 for my mother. No parole, no special privileges. The court ordered Stanton Biopharma to dissolve. Its assets were frozen. Its patents seized. Its board of directors subpoenaed for follow-up investigations. It was over. But more than that, it was undone. A week later, I got a call from the attorney managing my grandmother's trust. The full $10 per million was released to me, plus interest. She'd added a final clause before she died. If I ever proved the company had harmed people, I'd get everything. I used the first $1 million to launch the Eleanor Initiative, a nonprofit focused on clean water access and environmental justice. The second $1 million? I gave it to Theo. He tried to argue. "You earned this." "No," I said. "We survived it. That's different. Use it to fix something. Start fresh." He applied to Yale Law 2 weeks later, environmental law, Of course. Got in. Full ride. As for me, I left New York. I bought a small house on a lake in Vermont. No neighbors. No drama. Just trees, water, and the occasional overconfident goose. I do consulting now. I work on my research. And every morning, I make my coffee slowly, with real cream and real peace. Sometimes people still recognize me. A barista once whispered, "You're that guy whose family tried to kill him." I smiled. Yep, and I'm the guy who lived. The hate mail stopped after a few months. The sympathy letters didn't. Some came from other black sheep, kids who stood up to toxic parents and lived to tell the tale. Some were just thanks. But my favorite came from a teenage girl in Iowa. She wrote, "Your story made me realize I'm not the problem in my family. They are. And now I know I'm not alone." I pinned that letter above my desk. Because that's the truth, right? We all get handed stories, expectations, roles. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is rewrite the damn thing.